All right, everyone, we had the anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre the other day, and naturally, of course, there were some shenanigans going on online. Seems to happen around the same time every year and always involves dissidents and people critical of the Chinese Communist Party. It's interesting, isn't it? Twitter banned a bunch of accounts that were critical of China on that day, around the time when the Tiananmen Square massacre was trending. And then it restored them and apologized, and they said, well, it was a mistake. You know, our bots, basically, our algorithms, thought that you were spam accounts, and they were banned for, wrongful behavior on site, like basically being bots. And then they realized, of course, well, this actually, we're getting complaints about all these thousands of accounts we banned. I guess they weren't bots after all. But it took some hours to restore them. And what I'm thinking is this, isn't this convenient? Twitter can break the cycle of Tiananmen Square's trending by banning a bunch of accounts that are contributing to that trend, thus lessening the impact, the awareness of Tiananmen Square for people in the West, which helps with Chinese tourism-based optics and money. Therefore, Chinese party does this as a propaganda method. And then you can restore the accounts. You can say it's plausible deniability because you can say that the robot did it, even though it wasn't. It was a human decision, I'm sure. I'm sure that a human decision was made at the request of Chinese businesses, which own stock in Twitter. They advertise on Twitter, blah blah blah. Twitter appeases China whenever possible. I think Twitter is allowed in China, if I remember correctly, a filtered version of it, but I'm pretty sure it is. I could be totally wrong on that one. Don't quote me on that. Basically, China asked them, hey, tone it down with the Tiananmen Square stuff today. It's a sore spot for us in our nation's history. We don't want people in China even knowing about what happened, and we'd prefer as few people in the West know as well, because we're trying to, have a shiny image so people will come and consume, and they'll think fondly on us for propaganda purposes. By the way, here's some money, Twitter. Hush, hush. And then they say, okay, we can do that. So they look at the accounts that are using certain words that are more harsh than just, hey, remember Tiananmen Square, and nobody cares about that. But words that are more harsh, like the bloody Chinese communists slaughtered these kids. Here's a picture of a tank rolling somebody over. You ban those accounts, you break the trending, and then you restore them. Then the day's over. By then, well, no more problem. Nobody cares about the issue because of the 24-hour news cycle. How convenient! How that works! Ha ha! Score one for the Red Chinese. Dorsey used to go to Burma, one of the worst human rights violators in the fucking world, and stomp around with commies down there and go pretend that he was a meditation guru. If you look at that dude's face, you can tell he's one of those people who became a burnout and thought he achieved enlightenment and all he became was an asshole. That's really what it's about. And Twitter is run in that manner, into the ground. It's funny looking at the stock of some of these tech firms right now because they're being investigated for antitrust violations. It's funny to watch their stock tumble, with the exception of Google and Amazon, which of course, make a lot of money for me. Just saying, with my own wallet. But I mean, anyone who holds Facebook or Twitter stock at this point, are you fucking nuts? You insane? Not going to exist in 10 years, probably. Better thing for the world. Instastock, maybe Zuckerberg's other asset that actually makes sense, but it's pretty funny. But it's great to see Twitter suspending a bunch of people who are critical of China. Then it mysteriously restores them. Whoops, the bot did it. It's interesting how these bots always malfunction with regards to either one of two things. People who are critical of a leftist regime, like Chinese dissident or whatever, or people who are just generically on the right, so-called. Or I would say outside of the left anyway. Anyone the sleeping giants don't like, or that Jared Holt makes a hit piece about, I suppose, is on Twitter's shit list too. It's amazing how all of these so-called activists taken from the so-called working and middle class are basically have the same beliefs as a bunch of billionaires. Nobody's noticed this coincidence yet. It's a total coincidence, by the way. There's no coordination. There's no collusion. There's no plan to dumb down your mind. Government is benevolent, goddammit, except for that orange man that we need to remove because he's a fascist. Here, let the corporations help you do so. It's a peaceful, family-friendly America. It's interesting when a U.S. tech firm is helping the Chinese government. It's funny because, if you look back like 10 years, it was generally held by people on the left. Yes, the Chinese government is brutal and they abuse workers. And they're not even really, in the liberal sense, they weren't on the left. They don't want workers' rights. They don't want environmental reform. They certainly don't want free expression. That's basically the Chinese communist government. That's what they stood for. A bunch of communistic, authoritarian fucking bullshit. and then that they were abusive towards other countries too, like warmongering towards their neighbors sometimes, like Vietnam and its fishing vessels, or the Philippines more recently, with some islands there actually claimed by both. Things of that nature. China engages in a form of soft imperialism when you think about it. Don't tell that to a Marxist or a self-proclaimed socialist. They'll blow a gasket and say that you're just a CIA pawn or something like that. It's very interesting. Very interesting how they get such such cognitive dissonance in this regards. But the Chinese government used to be sort of the laughingstock of even the left-wing online. Like people on Facebook, I can remember some of the groups there, just because people were critical of the Iraq War, of certainly Bush or even latter-day Obama, didn't mean they suddenly liked the Chinese communists. Now, though, it's no longer fashionable. I can remember SpongeBob SquarePants in China was a viral video back during the Zeitgeist era. And it was really funny, back when liberals were more libertarian in their views in regards to some of these things, are more populistic, more like earlier wave Bernie Sanders, understanding at least the basic rudiments of economics, which was funny at the time. Now they don't do that. Now it's just Orange Man bad, so Chinese communists must be good. Yeah, Twitter we shouldn't remember Tiananmen Square, hail leftism. It's basically what I expect some of these people to parrot. That's about all. Peace out.